He fixed her car for free, not knowing she was a billionaire, and that one act would change both their lives forever. But when her board forced her to choose between him and her empire, she disappeared without a word. Type, I believe in second chances if you choose love over fear. Jack Turner never planned to leave his small Willow Creek garage that dusty summer evening, but when a sleek, overheated car rolled up under the fading glow of the setting sun, something inside him knew he couldn't turn away. He saw her, Evelyn Hale, standing there in her crisp white blouse, hair pulled back, trying to hide the exhaustion in her green eyes. She looked out of place among the oil-stained floors and rusted tools, but there was something in her posture, in the way she bit her lower lip while looking at the steam rising from the hood, that made her look almost fragile. Jack wiped his hands on his jeans, approached without hesitation, and told her, "Looks like your radiator's throwing a fit." She tried to keep her voice steady, but there was a crack in it when she said, "Yeah, I noticed." As he worked, she watched him, not with impatience, but with a strange, quiet curiosity that unsettled him more than he would admit. He didn't know her name, didn't care about the expensive car, or her perfume that briefly replaced the scent of oil in the air, only that she looked like someone trying not to fall apart. When he refused her money after fixing the radiator, telling her to pay it forward, her eyes shimmered with something unspoken. Driving away, Evelyn's fingers tightened on the steering wheel, her vision blurring as tears welled up, thinking about the man who had shown her kindness without asking who she was. That night, as Jack locked up, he glanced at the empty road, a quiet ache blooming in his chest, not knowing that this encounter was the thread that would soon pull their worlds together forever. 2 days later, Jack was under the hood of Mr. Graves's old Ford, wiping sweat from his brow as the cicadas droned their relentless summer song, when he heard the unmistakable purr of the sleek car rolling into the gravel lot. He looked up, squinting against the harsh afternoon light, and there she was again, Evelyn Hale. But this time, she wasn't dressed like a woman who belonged to a world of glass towers and boardrooms. She was in dark jeans and a simple blue shirt, her hair falling loosely around her shoulders as she stepped out, holding 2 cups of coffee that seemed almost out of place among the rusted toolboxes and oil stains. Jack didn't say anything at first, just wiped his hands on a rag, meeting her eyes as she handed him a cup, their fingers brushing briefly, sending a jolt through both of them they pretended not to notice. "Thought you might need this," she said, her voice softer than he remembered, and he nodded, taking a cautious sip as the rich warmth spread through him, a small piece of comfort he hadn't realized he needed. They sat on an overturned crate outside the garage, the summer breeze carrying the scent of pine and warm asphalt as Evelyn stared at the horizon, her fingers nervously tapping against the cardboard cup. "Do you ever think about leaving this place?" she asked suddenly, her voice so quiet it nearly got lost in the wind. And Jack took a long moment before answering, watching the way the light danced across her hair. "Every man thinks about it," he said, "but not every man needs to." She turned to him, her green eyes searching, trying to understand what kind of man would choose this small world over everything else. She told him about the city, about the weight of expectations, the boardrooms filled with men waiting for her to fail, the emptiness of success without someone to share it with, her voice cracking just once before she caught herself. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," she whispered, and Jack just shook his head, giving her a rare, tired smile. "Because you need someone to hear it," he said. She reached into her bag, pulling out a black envelope with a trembling hand, offering it to him. "This is a job offer," she said, her voice steady, but her eyes betraying a quiet plea. "Come work with me. I need someone real." Jack looked at it, then back at her, seeing the fear and hope battling in her gaze, and with a slow exhale, he shook his head, pushing it back toward her. "I belong here," he said, and for a moment, something in her seemed to break, but she nodded, swallowing hard, blinking away the shine in her eyes as she stood, brushing invisible dust from her jeans, and walked back to her car. Jack watched as she paused before getting in, turning to look at him one last time, her lips parting as if to say something. But then she slipped inside, the engine roaring to life as she drove away, leaving Jack standing there with a coffee cooling in his hand and a strange, hollow ache blooming in the space she left behind. Jack tried to forget her, tried to drown the memory of Evelyn Hale in the steady rhythm of wrenches clinking, engines rumbling, and the smell of gasoline that clung to his skin like a second layer. But every night when the shop lights dimmed and the summer breeze cooled the concrete floors, he saw her sitting on that crate, looking at him like he was the last honest thing she could hold on to in a world that demanded masks. He told himself it was nothing, that she was just another customer, but the truth haunted him in quiet moments, like when he locked up at night and glanced at the empty road, half expecting to see her headlights pulling into the lot again. He replayed the way her fingers trembled when she offered him that envelope, the way her eyes softened when he told her he belonged here, the way her lips parted as if she wanted to say something before she drove away, leaving him with a silence heavier than the weight of his tools. Meanwhile, Evelyn sat in her penthouse office overlooking the city, staring out at the endless sprawl of lights that meant nothing to her anymore, the echo of Jack's refusal burning in her chest every time she tried to sleep. Charles Whitaker, the board's cold, sharp-eyed senior member, watched her closely during meetings, questioning her focus, questioning her investments, and she could feel the whispers behind her back, the doubt curling around her like smoke. She had fought so hard to build Hale Motors, to prove she could lead in a world that wasn't built for women to lead. But now she found herself questioning if all the boardrooms and accolades meant anything. If at the end of the day she was alone, holding victories she could never share. One night, the city lights reflecting in her wine glass, Evelyn picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over Jack's number, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in the quiet room. But she put the phone down, telling herself it was foolish, that she couldn't afford to be weak. But the emptiness was too much, and at 2 a.m., Jack's phone lit up in the dark garage, where he was sitting on the hood of an old Chevy, nursing a beer and staring at the stars. He didn't answer immediately, his thumb tracing her name on the screen, remembering the softness in her eyes, the tired strength in her voice, the way she made him feel seen for the first time in years. Finally, he pressed accept, holding the phone to his ear, his voice quiet, steady. Evelyn. There was a pause, the sound of her breath, unsteady, before she whispered, "Jack, I need to see you." He didn't say anything, but the silence spoke for him, the kind of silence that carried a promise. And when she said, "Can you come to the city?" he closed his eyes, exhaling, and simply said, "Yeah." As he hung up, Jack glanced around the garage, at the tools, the oil stains, the ghosts of every choice he had made to stay, and he knew that maybe for once in his life, it was time to leave Willow Creek, not to run away, but to find out if there was something worth the risk waiting for him in the city with a woman who had never truly left his mind. Jack arrived in the city before dawn, the empty streets glistening under streetlights as he parked his old truck in front of the towering glass building that bore the Hale Motors logo, like a crown against the sky, a world away from the cracked concrete of Willow Creek. He stepped out, adjusting the collar of his faded denim jacket, feeling the weight of the city pressing against him. But he didn't flinch as he walked through the revolving doors, the echo of his boots on marble reminding him with every step that he didn't belong here. But he was here for her. The receptionist glanced up, startled by the man with oil-stained hands and eyes that spoke of long nights and quiet roads. But before she could speak, the elevator doors opened, and Evelyn stepped out, her hair pulled back, dressed in a navy blazer and black slacks that did nothing to hide the exhaustion shadowing her eyes. For a moment, neither of them moved, the city humming around them as they stood there, two worlds colliding in the quiet space of a lobby. And then she exhaled, a small, broken sound before whispering, "Jack." He nodded, his jaw tight, stepping closer as she reached for his hand, their fingers locking together with the desperation of two people who had tried to forget each other and failed. She led him upstairs to her office, the skyline stretching behind her like a painting of a life she was tired of living alone. And when she turned to him, her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she held out a folder. "I want you to see something," she said, and Jack opened it, expecting another job offer, another plea to leave Willow Creek. But instead he saw blueprints, sketches of a real garage. Not just any garage, but one that carried his vision, his soul, his way of fixing cars the right way, with a note in her handwriting at the bottom, "Let's build this together." Jack looked up, his eyes searching hers as she spoke. "This isn't about a job, Jack. It's about building something real, something that matters, with someone I trust." The city lights reflected in his eyes as he closed the folder, his thumb brushing over the words she had written. The room silent, except for the sound of their breathing, heavy with the weight of choices and chances. "Why me, Evelyn?" he asked quietly, and she stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Because you see me, not the company, not the expectations. Just me, and I see you, Jack. The way you fix things, the way you care, the way you don't let the world change you." For a moment, the world fell away, leaving just them in the quiet of her office as she reached up, her hand brushing against his jaw, her eyes glistening. "I don't want to build this without you," she whispered. And Jack, who had spent his life fixing what others abandoned, realized that for the first time, he wanted to build something that couldn't be broken, something that would last, something with her. And with the city watching, Jack leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers, whispering, "Then let's build it. Together." They started the project in a dusty lot on the edge of the city, where old warehouses stood like silent sentinels, watching the world change around them, and Jack found himself trading the hum of cicadas for the distant rush of traffic as he and Evelyn walked through the empty space, her heels clicking softly on cracked pavement while he traced lines in the dirt with the tip of his boot, mapping where lifts would go, where the office would stand, where the cars would rest under his care. Evelyn showed up every morning, coffee in hand, her hair tied back, but a few strands always escaping, and Jack would catch her brushing them behind her ear as she argued with contractors, her eyes flashing with the same fire that had built an empire, but now was focused on this place they were building together. They spent long days choosing the right equipment, arguing over the paint color for the walls, laughing when Jack insisted on keeping the old metal sign he had salvaged from Willow Creek that simply read, "Honest Work," in faded letters. At night, they would sit on the hood of her car, eating takeout from paper boxes, the lights of the city reflecting in her eyes as she listened to Jack talk about the cars he had fixed, the people he had helped, the small kindnesses that made him believe in the work he did. And Evelyn would find herself telling him about the weight of boardrooms, the constant fight to prove herself, the loneliness that success could never fill. One evening, when the construction lights cast long shadows over the gravel, a slow song drifted from the old radio Jack kept nearby, and without thinking, he held out his hand to her, a soft, crooked smile on his lips as he said, "Dance with me." She hesitated, her eyes searching his, but then she slipped her hand into his, letting him pull her close as they swayed under the glow of the sightlights, her head resting against his chest as his hands settled on her back, grounding them both in a world that felt like it was just theirs for that moment. She felt the roughness of his calloused hands, the steady beat of his heart, and realized she had never felt safer than she did in that unfinished garage with the scent of sawdust and promise hanging in the air. Jack closed his eyes, breathing her in, the scent of her shampoo mixing with the warm breeze, and for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to hope, to dream of a future where he wasn't fixing what was broken, but building something that would last. When the song ended, they didn't pull away immediately, their foreheads resting together as the city hummed around them, and Evelyn whispered, "I don't want this to be just a project." Jack's hand tightened around hers as he replied, his voice rough but certain, "It won't be." In that moment, surrounded by the skeleton of what would become their dream, they knew that this was no longer about a garage or about proving something to the world, but about finding a place and a person they could finally call home. The garage began to take shape, steel beams rising against the dawn sky while the scent of fresh concrete mixed with the sharp tang of motor oil Jack always carried with him. A scent that Evelyn found strangely comforting as she stood beside him each morning, coffee in hand, boots crunching over gravel as they inspected every inch of the project they were building together. But as the walls went up and the lifts were installed, as the dream began to solidify into something real, The outside world started to press in, bringing with it whispers, doubts, and the cold, watchful eyes of men in suits who never looked at Evelyn as a partner, but only as a threat. Charles Whitaker summoned her to the boardroom, his voice calm and patronizing as he slid a report across the table, questioning the millions she had invested in what he called a vanity project, his eyes glinting with a challenge she had fought her entire life to overcome. Evelyn sat there, her hands folded tightly in her lap, the echo of Jack's laughter, his quiet strength, the promise in his eyes when he said, "We're building this together," ringing in her mind as she fought to keep her voice steady, reminding herself that this was worth the fight, that he was worth the fight. Meanwhile, Jack felt the tension building in the way Evelyn's shoulders tensed when she arrived at the site, the way she would smile at him, but her eyes carried storms she refused to let out. One evening, as the city lights flickered to life and the garage stood silent around them, Jack found her alone, standing by the window of the small office they had designed together, her reflection in the glass looking as tired as she felt. "Talk to me," Jack said, his voice gentle but firm, and Evelyn shook her head, swallowing hard as she whispered, "They think I'm distracted. They think you're a distraction." Jack stepped closer, the scent of oil and soap clinging to him, grounding her in a way nothing else could, as he lifted a hand to brush a strand of hair behind her ear, his thumb lingering against her cheek. "Am I?" he asked softly, and Evelyn's breath caught, tears welling in her eyes as she shook her head. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're the only thing that feels real." Jack pulled her into his arms, holding her as she trembled, letting her finally release the fear and exhaustion she kept hidden from the world, his hand moving gently over her back as he whispered, "Then let them think what they want. Let them talk. Let them doubt. We know the truth." She pulled back just enough to look at him, her green eyes searching, her lips trembling as she asked, "What if I lose everything because of this?" Jack's gaze was steady, his hands framing her face as he replied, "Then we build it back, together." And in that quiet office, with the lights of the city painting their silhouettes against the glass, Evelyn leaned in and kissed him, not out of fear or desperation, but because in that moment she chose him and he chose her, and they chose the future they were brave enough to build, together. The grand opening of Turner and Hale Classics arrived on a crisp autumn morning, the city humming softly around them as people gathered, the scent of coffee and engine oil blending with the cold air as Jack adjusted the collar of his worn leather jacket, his eyes scanning the crowd for her. Evelyn stepped out of her car wearing jeans and a simple white sweater, her hair down, the CEO mask gone, replaced by a softness in her eyes that was just for him. And when she reached him, she didn't hesitate, pressing a kiss to his cheek, whispering, "We did it," as flashbulbs went off around them, capturing a moment that belonged only to them. The garage was alive with laughter, the echo of engines starting for the first time on the new lifts, the smell of fresh paint still clinging to the air as customers and old friends came to shake Jack's hand, to thank him for not forgetting where he came from. And he saw Evelyn standing in the middle of it all, laughing as she spoke with an old man who had brought in his 1967 Mustang, her hands resting on the hood like she belonged there, like she had always belonged there. As the sun began to set, casting the garage in a warm golden light, Jack found her out back, leaning against the wall, her eyes closed as she breathed in the moment. And when she opened them, he was there, standing in front of her, a small smile on his lips as he said, "This is just the beginning." Evelyn reached for his hand, their fingers lacing together as she replied, "As long as it's with you." They stood there, the sounds of the city fading into the distance, the promise of tomorrow alive in the soft rustle of leaves overhead. And for the first time, neither of them was afraid of what came next, because they had built this together. Not just a garage, but a home, a future, a life that was real, honest, and theirs. If this story touched you, type, "I believe in second chances" in the comments and share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe for more stories of love, courage, and quiet victories. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with a single act of kindness that changes everything.